Okay, welcome back to Balanced, where each episode Steve and I discuss a philosophical topic and try to use common sense, reason, and logic to find a better way forward.
On this episode, we've named it porn addiction. And then, sort of an extra part to that is what is real love. So, we want to talk about those two things because I think, I think it's an important topic. I'm going to go ahead and start off by asking how I usually ask when we're talking about pornography. If you choose to divulge, have you watched pornography?
Yes.
Okay. So I have too. It's been a long, long time, so I can't consider myself a subject matter expert on this. Last time was sometime around 1990 when I was in the army. It was on VHS.
So that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, it was on a VHS tape. And I had seen some pornography before that when I was in high school at like a friend's house when his dad had like some VHS tapes. VHS, that's really dates it, right?
I mean, the world has moved on for sure.
Yeah, and then remember like looking as a kid, like in elementary school, like there's a couple friends that I can remember that their parents were divorced and they lived with their dad, would have like Playboy, Penthouse, Hustler magazines in the house, and of course the dad's at work and like we're off of school, so he'd be like, come on, let's go look at this
Yeah.
these things, and you'd be like, wow.
I
So
think probably a lot of guys from our, or I shouldn't say guys, a lot of people,
yeah,
yeah, from that grew up in that era, probably have that shared experience.
do they still have these, right? Playboy,
Um,
Penthouse, Hustler.
that's a great question because where would you? I don't recall ever having seen these when I'm in like Hudson News in the airport.
No, but like I remember being like at drugstores, like in the magazine aisle, and they would always put them up high, like
Yeah, with
remember,
the little wrapper or something.
yeah, with a wrapper and a cover, so like it was like for adults only,
Hmm.
obviously, like even out of reach of children,
So to your question, is this something that's still out there in the world? Can you go to Walgreens and buy an issue of Penthouse? I honestly don't know the answer to that. I haven't even I
Yeah,
haven't even thought about it or looked in I can't even remember like the last time I even actually noticed. Maybe you know what? Actually, I do recall having seen some in like gas stations, like while I was on like a road trip, and you
okay,
go into like
okay.
the rest stop gas station.
If we want to know if they're in more mainstream places, we've just given you your next field assignment, Ben.
But
So
yeah, but honestly, why? I mean, everyone, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we go through this episode. But it seems the print publication seems irrelevant now. I mean, everyone has a phone in their pocket that you can just pull up
yeah.
instantaneously whatever you want for
Yes,
free.
and that's really why I asked that question. Like, are they really? I don't, and I'm not saying I never would have gone into a magazine section in the past, but I definitely haven't since like you have your phone and anything you want to look up or find out about, you just look it up there, right? Like, guys would get these weightlifting magazines and a bunch of middle school kids would always like want to get the Soldier of Fortune magazine, you know, and different things that they would look at. So I just don't know if those are around still. I'm imagining they are. So initial thoughts. Why are we talking about this topic? Now, I'll answer that question first. I said earlier, I think it's important because I've known and talked with some people um, who have felt like it was a little bit of a problem for them. Part of this is because I've been for many, many years in a security role where I work,
Hmm.
and I have dealt on multiple occasions over the years with inappropriate things such as people um, viewing pornography on work computers while at work, which is obviously something that people say, hey, that's shouldn't be doing that here. It's improper.
Man,
Um,
that's it's hard to imagine. I mean, obviously, these people know that they're using government work computers. Imagine the grip that it would have over you. I feel like everyone would know that their work issued laptop or computer. It's just,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a thing. It's a thing. So that's why I say that why this topic. I think it's important. I've raised two sons. And, I know that they've had access, they've had phones and they've had like tablets and everything growing up, all around the house and everything. And, there have been I mean, boys are boys, right? And there have been some somewhat embarrassing moments for my wife to pick up a tablet at times and run into something that she was completely not prepared for.
Sure, sure.
So, and I don't think that's something that's very uncommon. It just had happened in my house. I think it's important because it's everywhere and the access is
Effortless.
a click away, right?
Yeah, yeah, effortless. Does that conclude your
Yeah, yeah.
response? I would add, in the way that I would answer that question, I think this is an important topic because I'm really curious as we kind of dig into this a little bit to maybe uncover some of the the coincidence between the this effortless access that we're talking about and some of the trends that we're seeing with the generations that are coming up now. These are kids who grew up in a world like you were just saying with your sons, where it wasn't a friend's dad's nudie magazine. It is this ubiquitous thing that you can access at any time and you can get as specific as you want. And, there's a whole generation of people coming of age that grew up in a world where that was the kind of the norm. And if I've read some articles about like fewer and fewer people are dating, and there's a lot of a lot of single people aren't even looking for relationships anymore. And it's not just an American thing, but in other places as well. But I'm curious if there's a correlation because it seems like
I think there probably is.
yeah, certainly that type of relationship with pornography that people are able to have nowadays, it would have to affect, at the very least, it would have to affect the way people think about relationships and the sexual act. And, so I think that's certainly worth talking about.
Sure, sure. Absolutely. And that's why we had it on our list of topics. So I always go to the dictionary, get some definitions. The depiction of erotic behavior, as in pictures or writing, and you can see I added or video. It didn't say that,
Hmm.
but which is weird. But so depiction of erotic behaviors, as in pictures, writing, or video intended to cause sexual excitement. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, maybe the definition is from the early 20th century.
Yeah.
They just haven't
and
updated it.
Yeah. And so material is the definition too. So pornographic material says such as books or photograph, and I added again, or video footage that depicts erotic behavior and is intended to cause sexual excitement. So it's either the actual depiction or the material that holds it. That's what we are calling pornography. Now, my question for you, do the cartoons exist out there that have erotic sexual behavior? Do they count as pornography to you?
Oh, I would say if it's a cartoon um, of cartoon porn, sure. I mean, yeah, why not?
Yeah. And in the course of, like I said, working in security, like I have, and some of these incidents, you would be super surprised, I would bet, that I have seen, because you have to go across and see what someone has been looking at when you're looking into an incident that needs to be addressed with an employee. And I have seen like cartoons in terms of the hentai or hente. I'm not sure how they pronounce it. So that's like
The Japanese stuff.
the Japanese stuff. But I have also seen like Jetsons, Flintstones, Scooby Doo. And I know that would get you laughing because it got
Well,
me laughing.
because as soon as you say that, as soon as you say Family Guy, I don't want to be inappropriate, but there's certainly an almost comedic element to that.
Yes, yes. And but one thing I have come across as well that was sort of like considered on the line because people didn't know how to react to it, like meaning decision makers about what are we going to do about this,
Yeah, yeah.
is pictures like excellent drawings, but like in realistic, not Jetsons, not Flintstones, right?
Mm-hmm. So illustration?
Realistic charcoal and or pencil sketchings from what I could tell that were extremely realistic.
That's kind of funny too, because Rendering something in charcoal, I feel like makes it feel, I don't know. I was going to say it makes it feel like more like high art, like, oh, that's just art. But
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
it depends on the subject matter.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And again, it wasn't like that I had it was pictures of that like charcoal art,
Yeah,
on
yeah. No, I gotcha.
the internet. So the question comes, we talk about porn addiction. You hear people talking about this in WebMD. They say it's when someone can't stop looking at porn, even if they want to. And the obsession gets to the point that it interferes with work, relationships, and other parts of daily life, which sounds a lot like other addictions, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, and I think, like you said, if someone is doing something like at work or in an inappropriate place, of course, that does seem like it's interfering with your daily part, the other parts of your daily life. So,
I mean, yeah, when you're sitting down with executive leadership to have a conversation about the porn that was on your work computer, this definition does shed some light on what we were just saying. I was saying, like, why would people look at it on their work laptops when they know that everything on the company computer is scrutinized? Well, there's your answer, because it's a compulsion that they're not in control of.
absolutely, absolutely. Most likely this is a current problem due to just that, like we said, the widespread availability of internet porn. So, for example, and I just quick, you could search this anywhere, but this happened to be on WebMD. They said in 2019, Pornhub had 42 billion visits, which is 115 million a day.
Hmm.
So that's huge,
Can you
right?
imagine the ad revenue flowing through that
It's incredible.
organization? Yeah, it's
Yes.
incredible.
And so far, and now I looked this up. This is probably a couple weeks back. I did this, but it said this is in Wikipedia. So far in 2023, the top 10 websites visited on the planet are not porn sites. Number 11, X videos, and number 12, Pornhub rather are. So the 11th and 12th most visited websites.
I'm
So
actually
this
surprised by that. I would have thought that porn would be more heavily represented on a list of the top.
Well, but you think of your Amazon, your Google, you could probably name a couple real quick
Yeah, yeah.
that you're going to say, oh, those are absolutely going to be the top. Your Facebook, your things of that nature. There's some big ones that people just like of all sorts just are hitting, like Amazon. Everybody's buying stuff on Amazon. So, but 11 and 12, that's pretty high up for something that most people would be like, hey, you're not supposed to do this in certain areas. This is something that's supposed to be low key. This is, so it seems like I don't think these numbers prove there's a problem, but I think they show that it's very widespread and high use.
Hmm.
There's a debate whether or not that heavy use of pornography is an addiction in a medical sense of the word. So the World Health Organization added compulsive sexual behavior as a mental health disorder in 2018, and that just says compulsive sexual behavior. It doesn't single out pornography. It could be other things.
Hmm.
It refers to repetitive sexual activities becoming a central focus of a person's life. And goes on to say, just like we said before, to the point that they neglect their health and personal care or other interests, activities, and responsibilities. So that's just sounds like what we just said as far as the pornography addiction. So this is the World Health Organization. What do you
Hmm.
think about that?
Well, I wonder if it's not actually a defect of the dopamine system and the way that people kind of manage their pleasure seeking.
Could be. And there are people like you're saying, some experts are saying, and this is still, I'm looking at WebMD when I did this research, some experts are saying, hey, the same brain activity is shown in drug or alcohol addiction, meaning when the like you just said, when the circuits in your brain associated with reward, motivation, and memory get turned on,
Hmm.
it's shown in those who use pornography in good amounts, people who regularly use it, right? So, but these are some experts saying this, but then again, we go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, right? You've heard of this, and I think that's
The,
on version 5 now,
the
or
DSM-5. Yep.
um, but porn addiction is not recognized. It's not recognized, and this is probably because why you would say why would it be? These guys up here are saying there's the same brain activity as drug or alcohol addiction, but there's other studies that they dispute the idea that's porn related to addiction, with one study actually finding that porn did not activate those parts of the brain usually
Hmm.
involved with addiction. In fact, brain activity in these areas, according to this study, decreased. So bottom line, science is not in agreement. The health community is not. So
Yeah. Well, just
it's
hearing that, it sounds like, I mean, of course, that type of like the experience of interacting with pornography and self-pleasure, of course, is like directly wired to the brain's dopamine system, pleasure receptor. Those whole things seem on the surface to be indisputably interconnected.
yeah, and I think here's the issue. Just watching it is one thing, right? The elephant in the room is we're just not people aren't just watching it,
Right,
right?
right.
They're doing things while they watch it. So I think that's where it comes in, and that's probably where the disconnect is, if you would ask me. But
Hmm.
the bottom line is right now, the science isn't in agreement. It's not in the DSM. It's not officially, although it is a thing that people talk to and refer to, just like sexual addictions.
Yeah.
But compulsive sexual behavior, I think, would be that is recognized, and that's what we're talking about.
Right.
So
It's almost like a subset of that
yeah,
disorder. Yeah.
exactly, and a subset that is widespread because of the easy accessibility of it.
Hmm.
Now, I went to look. I still on WebMD looked at. There's this it's educators, counselors, and therapists. They say, hey, there's little proof that either sex addiction or porn addiction are problems.
Hmm.
Now, is this because you would think they'd say it was a big problem if they want to, if they want job security, right? Counselors, therapists, sex educators.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the fact that that group is saying it's not a problem, there's no proof of this. It struck me. You would
Yeah.
think if anyone would just say it's a problem just because it bring themselves more business, it would be these people.
Right.
And they actually caution. They say, "Hey, listen, consensual sexual behavior is not a disorder. If someone's watching it, they're fine with it themselves. They're doing
Uh-huh.
something. It's hard to say you're consensual with yourself, but
Well, right, but I think the distinction here is not the distinction
sexual
here.
addiction,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
It's
Yeah,
about like, look, are you spending so much time, and is this such a compulsion that you're derailing other aspects of your life over it? Because that's when it becomes an issue.
yeah, exactly. And so whether it's an official addiction or not, in WebMD, when it's discussed, they're talking about, hey, those who use porn regularly have intense urges or cravings for sex. And I'm thinking that seems pretty normal.
Hmm.
So that are they different than anyone else? I don't know, right? But then it says they turn to porn when they're anxious and tend to struggle at work and at home. Some experts, this is what you were talking about earlier. Some experts cite a link between heavy porn use and dissatisfaction with relationships.
Yeah.
So people like, so I don't watch it, haven't since like 1990. So I guess I must be satisfied with my relationship. I'll throw that in there. But the bottom line is, I feel like that's the link you're talking about. People dissatisfaction in relationships are just like, hey, maybe I can just use porn and I don't need to have this steady girlfriend or something.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll just go in order with a couple thoughts on the points that you just made. So, the first one, those who use porn regularly have intense urges or cravings for sex. I think, people are individuals, everyone's unique, and people have different libidos and sexual appetites. But I think in general, right, we're all, as human animals, we're all, or most of us are programmed with some level of desire, and we just so happen to be living in a world where you can indulge those urges very easily. So people turn to porn when they're anxious and tending to struggle at work. Yeah, and it's an endorphin fix, it's a dopamine fix, and that has a calming effect. So that makes sense to me. um, the link between heavy porn use and dissatisfaction in relationships. Now, I'll just say here, based on the little reading that I've done and my limited understanding of it, is that I think what's happening, and this is probably related to this, is that apparently the line between the type of sex that's depicted in pornography and actual sex in real life, especially in relationships, that line gets kind of blurry,
Yeah.
and the expectations, I think people get confused, frankly. I think that
Yeah.
like you look at enough porn or stuff that's popular in porn, and it's not realistic. I mean, porn is not real sex. It's a performance,
Yes.
and that's an important distinction.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. 100%.
Well, that's another thing, and maybe we'll get into this too, but that porn requires this constant pushing the boundary, right? Because it's like you're never going to be satisfied. Like once you've had
Sure.
something, it's like you're always looking for the next thing. What's the next most extreme thing?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And then that's why it gets more and more unrealistic. And if someone's, if, especially I think about young people, if young people are like, hey, that's, this is what like excites me now. It's got to be this extreme, way unrealistic thing. And then they're going into a situation with someone and thinking, hey, let's do this. It's like, that's not what people are doing. Like you're getting,
The average person,
yeah,
right? In the average relationship. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So okay, signs. Let's talk about signs of unofficial porn addiction. Still on WebMD because they're saying like, hey, it's a thing, even though there's some back and forth, the science doesn't agree, et cetera. Like we said, to say, hey, it becomes a central part of your life. You stop doing things you enjoy to see more porn. All right. You may neglect your health or personal care, lose interest in other activities, less interested. This is what you were talking about in social encounters,
Mm-hmm.
um, because you don't maybe need that to satisfy that need. It can damage current relationships because of, like you said, maybe the expectations. Someone has extreme expectations of what sex is going to be like, and other people are like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Um, a person might let go of the other responsibilities. We talked about this. It affects their job or their schoolwork. And then watching it in inappropriate places. This is like where people have gone over the boundary at work, in school, public bathrooms, things like you start saying, hey, this is really what people start to call deviant almost,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then your regular sex life becomes unfulfilling because of those expectations. And you crave more pornography. Even if you think that it's too much for you, you
Mm-hmm.
can't stop. And it becomes less enjoyable, but you still don't stop because you're, like you said, pushing those boundaries. I need to see something that, because if you're just watching all this over and over, you need another step, right? And then they're claiming heavy viewing for 6 months or more
And
is,
what qualifies as heavy viewing?
they did not say that, but said multiple times a day.
Hmm.
They didn't outline how many times, but it said, multiple times per day.
And I guess it's worth mentioning here that, there are millions of people, I'm sure. I mean, just like there's millions of people that enjoy a beer on occasion and aren't alcoholics, there's millions of people that use pornography in a responsible, moderated manner.
Yeah, so that makes me think of we've talked several times in different episodes about excess, right? Like if you're doing something to great excess, like it's generally probably not going to be good for you.
I realized this. I was watching a documentary a couple years ago about heroin addiction, and something occurred to me that I never had thought of before. I always thought that heroin is so addictive that anyone who tries it becomes addicted. And through some of the interviewing they were doing in this documentary and some of the people that they were talking to, I actually came to understand that the addictive personality is it's it's a personal thing. There are people who have used heroin and not become uh like full on heroin
Sure.
addicts. There are people that are able to like use a substance or use something that is inherently addictive and not get addicted to it. And the people that do get addicted are people that have kind of, I guess, a predisposition to yeah, like overuse, or like you said, the lack of moderation. And not just with porn or heroin, but with anything. I mean, with
Yeah.
anything that people get addicted to, it's it's almost like a two-part thing. So you have to have the substance and its nature, and you have to have the person and their nature.
Yeah, like
And
that predisposition to fall down that road, right?
right. And when you get and when those two things meet, right, the hooks get in deep.
I just don't know that I agree that there's like, oh, we're not going to recognize porn addiction specifically medically. We'll just say, like they said, that the sexual behavior, right? The repetitive sexual activity. So that's compulsive sexual behavior, right?
Hmm.
So compulsive sexual behavior, they're just saying that, but I feel like almost porn addiction could be, it could be its own thing because it's just so compulsive sexual behavior of other kinds. Um, it's just not as widespread, right? Of it's not going to be something so easily accessible to everybody. That's just how I feel. But so moving on, listen, we're not doctors, and we've shown they don't agree anyway, really on this. But to me, this is a thing. Like I said, working in security for many years, I've dealt with it, and it's not like once or twice. Right. It's not, it's way more than that. So, and I've known people personally. One person told me, hey, I feel like I have a problem with it. And I'm like, why is that? And he said, I think about it all the time. Additionally, I out in public, walking through the mall or wherever they are, they'll look at certain people that you might look at a person and say, oh, wow, what an attractive woman. And this person's picturing acts in their head of things that they've seen on some of this extreme pornography, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's very dangerous. And I think to me, when someone's telling me that and they said, what do you think about that? I said, stop watching it. The best advice I could give. That's like someone who, says, hey, I think I'm drinking too much alcohol. Like, wait, stop drinking it. It's just, that's the only answer I really have.
If only it was that simple.
I know
I think
is,
a better answer is maybe it's time to talk to somebody. You
yeah,
get some therapy.
no, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. That probably should have been what I said. But the first thing I was like, stop it. That
Yeah.
stuff's not real. That's not how
Well,
life
you're just
really is.
acknowledging
Yeah.
what the problem is.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, we're having this discussion, and the discussion is not a condemnation of pornography or the people who make it, or which is a whole other topic. I mean, like the reasons why people decide to go into that line of work are varied, and I'm sure that would be very interesting to discuss too. But for our purposes here today, I just think it's interesting that we're talking about this through the lens of addiction. Like anything else that exists, there's this propensity for some segment of the population to, to take it too far and not be able to moderate their use. And so I don't know. I just appreciate that that's the nature of the conversation. We're not saying there's anything wrong with watching porn. We're not saying there's anything wrong with making porn. It's legal, obviously. What consenting adults do is their prerogative. But the conversation about how dangerous is it really to the human psyche, or some people's human psyche, is a question worth asking. And the real value is in people have to understand and internalize this idea that what you see in porn, it should not be the model for your actual real life sexual interactions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's not, right. That's not how it goes. And that makes me worry about the young people who can have access to it. And like I said, I'm sure if you go on these websites,
In mainstream porn, there's not a lot of respect,
yeah,
and that's something that should absolutely exist in real life interactions. Consent, of course. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's hard enough to have to come of age
yeah.
in the world.
Okay, we're talking about sex is not love and pornography is not how sex really is. So I went and said, okay, we talked about what is real love. Cambridge Dictionary says love is used to describe all strong feelings of closeness and care between two people, whether those two people are in a romantic relationship or not. I get it. So that can be like, you love your brother, you love your sister, your grandmother, whatever. Um, but I said, I don't know. I want to see a different. So believe it or not, I went to another hit on when I looked this up, the Urban Dictionary comes up. I was like, okay, let's see what they have to say. And it said the act of caring for and giving to someone else, having someone's best interest and well-being as a priority in your life. And it said to truly love is a very selfless act. I sort of liked that um, definition. What do you think about those?
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I noticed that there was nothing in either of those about sex. So sex is important. It's a natural function and the way that we procreate. But sex in and of itself is it isn't love. You know, some of these dating sites and some of these just for these hookups. I know people that are, you know, adults who had like whether they're divorced or, you know, otherwise if they become widowed. I know people who've specifically told me I went out on these sites and there's just hookups and I went and they were like, it's crazy out there after
Yeah.
being and so and there's not a lot of love in those many of those types of things. Although
Uh-huh.
people can find a significant other that they fall in love with through those means, and
Sure.
it probably happens quite often. But there's some very, according to a couple of guys I know who had big life changes, you know, in their 30s and 40s, they're like, it's crazy out there, Steve.
I think the apps make it essentially a meat market. You're just
Yeah,
browsing the cuts, and with a swipe of your thumb, you can see like what else is out there.
yeah. No, yeah, it's just really strange. Back to pornography and addiction to it. What I'm saying about this, we've talked about taking anything to excess, it can be negative. So we have to check ourselves, have some self-awareness and control. But I would say if someone has a problem, like you said, maybe I should have said that to a person that I had talked to in the past when I just said, hey, stop looking at it. You got to stop that stuff. If someone has a
Which
problem,
is not bad advice, Steve. It
no.
is not bad advice. I just think that it's for a lot of people, it's easier said than done.
Well, and I think if you know someone has a problem or someone tells you they have a problem, confront them, say, hey, let's do something about that. You should get some support, get some help. Um, you know, and maybe, like you said, maybe talk to someone about that. That's what I mean by support. So, and so I looked up and there's a place called addictionhelp.com, and it's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 1-800-662-4357. So I think you have always on this podcast been the one to stress like, hey, if someone really needs some help, you know, reach out because there's help to be had, right?
Yeah, absolutely a great thing to share. And I would imagine that people can call that hotline and get connected with licensed counselors who can help kind of
Yeah,
guide them towards next steps.
there's plenty of help out there for people who feel like, hey, I need help with moderation, right? That's where we're at here. Again, we didn't throw stones at anybody in the industry or anything because I don't it's a legal thing, consensual adults. But for final thoughts on it, if I just had to say, I'd say, and I'm going to get on the soapbox here for a minute, and then you can you know temper the episode.
Go ahead.
So say, go listen to episode 5, Balance, the one we did on social media. I feel the same way about porn.
Hmm.
It can be a time waster. It can, you know, I said before, I have an addictive personality. If you're the same, be careful. In my mind, you don't need the fantasy. Live in the here and now real world, interact with real people, try to foster relationships, find that person for you, you know, and do it that way. I think it's bad for children. I would say children need to stay away from that and to understand that type of sex is not love. Not saying sex is bad. Sex is a natural act, but teach our children to be kind, to love other people for who they are, to be good, and to do good things. So that's
Hmm.
what I have for you.
Well said. Um, I'll add two things. One, the key thing that I hope people take away from this episode is that porn does not represent reality. The other thing is, and I've said this in other episodes, but a big part of this is what I refer to as parenting yourself. Like that's one of the distinctions that separates responsible adults from irresponsible adults. You have to parent yourself. You have to know when to tell yourself no. You have to know when to let yourself indulge. And that's true in every area of life, but it's especially true with things that have the potential for addiction or abuse or overconsumption. And, porn is simply one of those things.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. And we can't, you know, you have to stay away from excess in almost everything, right? So it looks like we're at the end of the episode. You know what? I'd like to thank everyone for listening. I'm going to, you know, reiterate we now have listeners in Romania, Brazil, Australia, Canada, Italy, Taiwan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and of course, the United States. So thanks to all of those folks for listening. And if they like what they're hearing, and hit follow or subscribe, we'd appreciate it. And if there's any ideas, um, send an email at benstevebalancedpodcast@gmail.com. I check it once a day, and would love to hear from you, some ideas for episodes or other comments or anything at all. And can't say I'll respond immediately, but I will respond. So,
and thanks to everyone who took the time to send us emails so far. Balance is produced by myself and Steve. Our music is by Four Giants. You can check them out on Bandcamp or anywhere you stream music. As always, we thank you for listening and look forward to the next one. I'm Ben.
And I'm Steve.
And we are balanced.